I have a problem. My tools are taking over my workbench. To fix this, I'm building a hand tool storage cabinet. But here's the twist. I'm building three. A beginner build, an intermediate build, and an advanced build. And the advanced build almost broke me. Let's find out which one's right for you. Okay, the first thing we need to do for this beginner's cabinet is make the back. And I need a big piece of plywood to do that. So let's go over to the plywood rack and pull a piece out and get it cut down. Okay, the back of the case needs to be 29 inches tall and 22.5 inches wide. So we're going to rip it first to the width that it needs to be, which is 22.25 first. Okay, so now I'm going to just check my measurement with a ruler. And I want it to be 22.5. And that looks like it's right on the button. We're going to turn on our dust collection. To its height, which is 29 inches. So we're gonna lay it like that. Move this to here. Turn the table and dust collection back on. Back panel. This is what we're going to attach the shelves and the sides and the top to. So the next thing to do is cut those out of some pine I got at the big box store. We're going to do the tops and back sides first. Those need to be ripped at 5 3/4 inch. So I'm going to set up the saw to do that, and we'll get started with cutting that. I'm going to do the same thing with this board, checking the sides because this is Home Depot quality pine, and it's got a bad side on here, so we'll cut that off. We'll just do the same thing. Start. Now we're going to cut the top, sides, and bottom, and those are the 5 3/4 pieces. So we're going to take them over to the miter saw. We're going to square one end. We're going to measure 24 inches for the top and bottom, and then we're going to cut them. So first, the squaring of the end. And make my mark cut. I tend to cut just a little longer than my mark and trim it up at the table saw later, but you can do what you want. Okay, now I need to cut the left and right sides. They're the same width, 5 3/4, but the length is different. They're 29 inches tall. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to square off one end just to make sure it's cut square. Then we're going to measure from our square cut to 29 inches. That. Line up the lot mark with our blade line. Make sure on the outside. Okay. Now it's time to cut the shelves. I'm going to need 5 pieces. So they're all going to be 5 inches wide and 22.5 inches long. So again, the same procedure as the miter saw. We're going to square one end and then measure out 22 and a half, and then make our cuts. Okay, whoops, oopsie. There we go. We have 5 shelves, a right side and a left side, and a bottom and a top. This is all the wood that we're going to need to make our cabinet. So the next thing is to get the plywood, assemble the sides and the shelves and the top, glue it all up. Whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced, you need a trusted source for tools and hardwoods. That source is today's sponsor, WTB Woodworking. Whether you need tools, hardwoods, advice, just want to browse, WTB Woodworking is the place for you to be. My go-to, today's sponsor, William T. Burkle of WTB Woodworking, right here in Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania. WTB opened their new store just a year ago, and they've exploded in the woodworking community. His showroom is packed with the top brands: Powermatic, Jet, Lamello, Mafel, Microjig, Craig, and Festool. Everything from planers and joiners to miter saws. And right next door, a full warehouse of hardwoods and slabs: ash, cherry, curly maple, walnut, plus sheet goods like bolted birch, cherry veneer, and that super light foam core plywood that won't break your back. From September 20th to October 25th, 2025, they're running a saw stop giveaway. Enter at wtbwoodworking.com/giveaway and mark your calendar. October 25th, 2025 is their first anniversary and maker meetup. Food, fun, events, and your favorite YouTube woodworkers in person. Check out WTB Woodworking, 390 Pike Road, Unit 2, Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania. Or shop online and earn Burkle Bucks with every dollar you spend. Okay, we have all our parts cut, and on the assembly table, we're going to glue and screw them together, starting with the back to the left and right sides. Okay, and this is, we're going to do the right side first, get the nicest edge. And these are all butt joints. These are not complicated. We're going to glue them, screw them, and glue on the plywood edge. Okay, and I'm going to put that down and take my first side, which is my right side, butt it up against the back of the cabinet. Then I'm going to get a clamp. Again, make sure it stays square. Tighten out this side without banging ourselves in the head. These are going to be the clamps that hold it together. Okay. And we'll get set up for the second side. Left side, another bead of glue. Okay. Drop that down. Take our left side, see what the best edge is. This is the best edge. We're going to line it up with our back just like we did before. I'm going to put clamps on it, drill, and glue. Okay, now we're going to put the top in. So we're going to glue the sides, the back, and then we'll put the top on. Make sure we clear. Make sure that you put your screw above the screw here so that your other screw doesn't hit it going in. Move it up a little bit. Okay, and we'll do a couple holes in the back. Okay, now we're ready for the shelves. The first 3 shelves are spaced equally at 5 1/4. So I made a couple of spacer blocks, and starting from the top down, we're going to install them. We're not going to glue them in. We want them to slip in, and then we'll glue them or mount them from the back and the sides. So here we go. We're going to put the first one in. Got our tapper just in case we need to. Okay. Transition. Okay. Just by eye, we're going to center it with the shelf. And then just to be fancy, just do these so you have an idea. Okay. I'm actually going to flip it around and do exactly the same thing on the same side. Spacer, flush. Move them down to the next shelf. Basically, we're just going to repeat this 3 times. A lot of this is just going to be rinse and repeat because I'm building them all the same way. So once you get the idea, it should go pretty fast. Okay, just flip it back around. Just keep doing it. Okay. Last but at least one more do. Okay, now the next shelf needs to be 5 inches down, so I have 2 5-inch spacers. I'm just gonna do the same thing as before. Slip the shelf in carefully. Make sure it's butted up against everything. Okay, last shelf is 3 inches. So we are going to use the 3-inch square spacer blocks to set the last shelf. Okay. Take the sliders out. Flip it up. And there it is, the basic case. It'll hold all my planes on the first 3 shelves, and then my router plane, and my block planes, and my, what the hell are these things called? I don't know. I can't remember the name of it. I'm rushing so fast I can't get it. So I'm going to give it a quick sanding, get rid of all my marks, and then after that's done, we're going to mount it on the wall over in that square right there. So hold on, we'll be right back. Okay, I've installed ledger strip here where the cabinet's going to go, made sure it was level, and now I'm going to install the cabinet on this wall. Attached. Okay, now I can put my tools in. So the biggest plane goes up here, and then my number 5, my 2 number 4s, my routing plane, and my English routing. Okay. That, my block planes, and my spoke shaves. And there you go. 10 hand tools, stored, accessible, nice and neat, and no longer taking space on my workbench. The beginner design is simple and it works. It gets your tools off your bench. But I wonder, what if I souped it up just a little bit? Something like this. To kick off the intermediate build, I'm working with some white maple. Yep, straight from the big box store again. I'm marking out the rough lengths with chalk before heading to the miter saw, just to keep things organized, or at least to look like I know what I'm doing. Over at the miter station, I'm cutting the boards down to those chalked up lengths. They're still a bit oversized for now. I'll bring them down to the final dimension with the cross-cut sled at the table saw later. Doing this step first makes everything easier to handle. And of course, I hang on to the offcuts, just for those just-in-case moments we pretend won't happen but totally do. With everything rough cut, I've laid out the boards into their panel groups for the cabinet. Once I like the layout, I marked each set with a carpenter's triangle. This helps keep the grain matched, and honestly helps me keep my brain matched too. Looking at the seams, the joints aren't closing up on their own, so they'll need a little more attention at the joiner. Same as me after a long day in the shop. Alright, time to clean up those edges. Since my shop's the size of a generous closet, I roll out the joiner whenever it's needed. Once it's set up, we're good to go. Edge joining takes a little care. It's easy to lose that square edge if you rush. Make sure your fence is set at 90 degrees. Keep the wide base of the board against it and feed it through the cutter head. Keep your fingers clear of the danger zone. Push pads are a great idea for anything under 4 inches wide. These boards are a bit wider so I can hold them safely. I usually make 2 passes and check the seams after each one to make sure they're closing up nicely. With the edges jointed and looking clean, we're just about ready to start gluing up the panels. Okay, panel glue up time. I know, it's not exactly the most thrilling part of the woodworking. Nobody's tuning in for slow motion glue spreading, but it's where the project starts feeling real. Use a solid amount of glue, not too stingy, but don't go overboard either. When it comes to clamping, think even pressure, not arm wrestling strength. If you over tighten, 2 things can happen. You'll starve the joint of glue and the boards might bow and pop right out of the clamps. Ask me how I know. I know, nobody wants to watch sanding, but here's me doing it anyway for about 5 seconds. Don't worry, I'll spare you the rest, though sanding has a funny way of sneaking back into every project. Once that's done, it's time to size the panels at the table saw. I'm starting with the till board. That's where all the hand tools will be mounted. I'm using my Norm Abrams style panel sled for this. And yes, I love the New Yankee Workshop. Every Saturday at 5 p.m., appointment viewing. This was before YouTube, kids. Ask your parents about PBS. First, I square one end, flip the board, measure the final width, line it up with the fence, and make the cut. I'll repeat the same process for the top, bottom, sides, and the mounting structures. And just to keep those YouTube numbers up, I'll toss in another sanding shot, because apparently that's what the algorithm loves. Once everything is sized, we can start thinking about the fun part, assembly. Okay, a small change in plans. Apparently I got a little ahead of myself. Before we can start assembling, we need to shape the sides of the cabinet. The design tilts the back at about 8 degrees, which helps our top secret tool holders, coming soon, keep everything from tumbling onto the floor. I start by marking out the layout on the side panel and then cut the shape at the bandsaw. Because of the angle on the board layout, I can get both sides from one piece, keeping the second panel in reserve. Just in case, because it's me. Once they're cut, I stick 2 sides together with double-sided tape, lining up the straight edges. Then it's off to the coolest sanding tool in the shop, oscillating belt sander. I sand right down to my line, smoothing out the bandsaw marks until the edge is clean and even. Now that the sides are shaped and matched, we can finally move on to the cabinet assembly with a little help from the blue tool and the most controversial screws on the internet. And here they are, the blue tool and those infamous screws everyone loves to argue about. Yep, it's Craig pocket hole time. I start by drilling the pocket holes, 4 in the top panel with 2 on each side, then 8 in the bottom panel with 4 on each side, and then 6 on the 2 back stretchers, 3 on each side. Once that's done, I move to assembly. A little glue on the joints, I line up the pieces and drive in the pocket screws. I repeat the process for the top and the stretchers. And just like that, we've got ourselves a fully assembled carcass. Honestly, I don't know why pocket screws catch so much heat online. They're fast, strong, and easy.
Why wouldn't you use them? Vanity? Yeah, well, I'm not that fancy. I'll take sturdy over stylish any day. With the main box together, we can finally move on to some joinery details and start giving the cabinet a bit of character. The carcass assembled, we're on to the last big piece, the tilt board. This is the part that gives the cabinet its signature tilt, about 8 degrees back, so your tools stay put instead of launching themselves onto the floor. I make 2 8 degrees cuts on the table saw, one along the top edge and one along the bottom. That sets the tilt perfectly. After that, it's back to everyone's favorite hobby, sanding. Just a quick once over on the carcass to smooth everything out before moving on. Next up, we're cutting some oak strips that are 3/8 by 3/8 for the tool partitions and the border around the tool board. Each piece gets measured, trimmed, checked, and trimmed again until it's just right. I glue the left and right borders first using wood glue and a dab of super glue to act as instant clamps. Then it's the same careful process for the rest of the frame. Finally, we move on to the tool base. Each one's custom fit for the hand and block teams that will live there. 7 in total. A little glue, a little patience, a lot of double checking, and we've got ourselves a complete tilt board ready to install. Now it's time to give our last few tools a home, the router plane and the 2 spoke shafes. I start by laying them out on the tilt board and marking exactly where I want them to sit. Each tool gets 2 pegs, so I mark out the drilling spots carefully before using a 1/2 inch Forstner drill bit. Here's a little trick I learned the hard way. Drill the holes while the tilt board is still flat. That way, once the board is installed at its 8-degree tilt, the pegs naturally angle upward. Keeps your tools from sliding off every time someone slams the shop door or the wall cabinet rattles. Pretty clever, right? With the holes drilled, I cut some 1/2 inch oak dowels about 2 inches long. A bit of glue in the hole, a dab on the dowel, and they're set nice and snug. And with that, the tilt board is nearly complete. Just one more finishing touch to go. Remember those super secret helpers I mentioned earlier? Well, they're about to make their debut, and let's just say they've got quite a magnetic personality, unlike myself. Magnets to hold everything securely, 2 for the heavier planes and 1 for the smaller block planes. I've already measured and marked the spots, so with a 19/32 drill bit, I'll drill each hole about 5/16 deep. A drop of super glue goes in and a quick tappy tap of the mount and the magnets are locked in place. And just like that, the tilt board is ready for the final moment, installing and loading up the tools for the big reveal. Hooray, it's installation time, and not a moment too soon. My back's been filing complaints with HR. I start by setting the carcass on a ledger strip. That keeps it level and saves me from pretending I can still lift like I'm 20. Once it's sitting right, I secure it to the wall with 4 screws. The wall is covered in plywood, so no stud finding dance is required. Next, I press fit the tilt board snugly into the carcass, a satisfying click when it seats just right. And now, the fun part, loading it up. A number 7 plane, my number 5, 2 number 4 planes, my rabbiting plane, and a pair of block planes. Then comes the router plane, and finally the 2 spoke shafes. And there it is, the finished hand tool cabinet. So that was the intermediate build. It's functional, it looks great, and would be welcome in anybody's shop. But I still wasn't satisfied. So I built this. Behind these doors are every lesson I learned, and a few I learned the hard way. Okay, welcome to the advanced build. This build I thought was cursed. I had so many problems that it almost broke me, as you will see during the filming of the video. But right now we're doing the rough milling of all the wood. This is the advanced build, so I got this wood at a hardwood lumber outlet in Trenton. The wood is roughly 6/4 and needs to be rough milled. So you'll see me going through the process. You started it at the miter saw, and then I'm going through the joiner to face join it. And I have several of the lengths cut and ready to go, and I'll run them all through the jointer. The advantage of buying lumber at the hardwood dealer instead of the big box stores is, of course, that it's a lot cheaper. And you turn that savings into money by milling the lumber yourself. So this means you run it through the joiner, and now I'm running it through the planer, and I'm not bringing it down to the final width of the project sizes because I'm going to need to let it sit and acclimate in my shop for at least 24 hours. 48 hours would be better, but I was on a time crunch. I'm trying to get these videos out. I'm trying to make my schedule work a little bit faster so you guys can enjoy more videos sooner. So after I go through this preliminary milling sequence, I let the boards acclimate to my shop by stacking them on my assembly table and then come back in 24 hours. Now I'm going to take the wood that's sat in my shop for about 24 hours and start ripping it very close to final size. You see me here at the table saw. I'm ripping the top panel, the bottom panel, and soon the side panels of the new cabinet that I'm building for my hand tools. Now it's back to the planer to thickness them down to very close to their final size, which is going to be 7/8. My friend Eric Curtis has convinced me that the big box stores has made everything look like 3/4 should be the standard thickness for every piece of wood. But I agree with him now that I like the look of 7/8 for a thickness. It makes the piece feel more substantial. Here you see me using my crosscut sled that I made. That I like the big size of a crosscut sled, but I hated the weight. So I tried to make one that was still large, but lightweight, and this is what I came up with. I know not everyone wants to build a crosscut sled, so I'm also demonstrating the cross-cutting using a miter gauge aftermarket. I got this from Osborne. I saw it on Norm Abrams, the New Yankee Workshop, and bought it 10, 15 years ago. And then finally, I'm going to use the Rockler panel sled that you can buy from them. It works great, and because the fence is disposable, you can make several marks on it and line up your boards to those marks. Here I am ripping up the plywood for the back of the two doors that will be part of the new case. They're roughly oversized at about 10.5. I'll take them down to final size once I have the door size settled. But right now, getting them cut close is what I'm trying to do here. A few rabbets and dados in this project, and I like to use the L fence to do rabbets. Here I'm doing the rabbets that will receive those plywood panels in the side and the back of the doors that will be on the cabinet. The reason I use the L fence for the rabbets is it negates having to have a separate sacrificial piece of plywood to do the rabbets. And with the cost of plywood these days, if I don't have to sacrifice a piece of plywood to just making rabbets, I'm way ahead of the game. I've removed the L fence here because I have to do a couple of dados for the partitions that might be drawers or just spaces to place things. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. But right now I am lining up the edge of the dado with the one edge of my marked line on the board, and then I move it over until it kisses the other line, and then I run the board through. I do this for all the dados in the middle partition and the bottom partition of this cabinet, so that when they're assembled, they'll line up and I'll have 3 partitions in the bottom of the cabinet. I haven't noticed by now I have really bad vision. My glasses are really thick, and when I am trying to line up the blade with the lines on the boards, the glass's thickness really tends to make that a very hard thing to do. It's called the parallax effect, and sometimes I end up not lining it up correctly. So I'm constantly looking over the board with my nose almost touching the blade sometimes, it seems like, just so I can line them up correctly. We now can start on some of the sub-assemblies. This is the side door of the cabinet. There's 2 of them. They're identical. So I begin by gluing the top to the sides and clamping them down. Now I put some glue into the rabbet that's especially there for the plywood back. I'll insert the plywood back and squeeze everything together and make sure it fits. Get a couple of clamps to hold the top end securely. And then I need to put some glue on the cherry bottom. The cherry bottom has a bunch of end grains, so I put glue on the bottom and the sides. Then I take it and clamp it all together. This is where I started to think I was cursed, because even though I let them acclimate to my shop after I reduced them to their final sizes, somehow a slight twist got introduced to the bottom of the panel, causing some alignment issues that I'll end up sanding out later. Right now I'm back to the table saw, cutting out the back part of the main cabinet, and now I'm cutting the length of the main cabinet. As I mentioned before earlier in the video, I'm comfortable cutting it this way, but if you're not, please find a safer way to do it. so that you feel comfortable. We've begun assembly of the main cabinet. I put glue in the bottom rabbet of the sides and the bottom panel, and I am assembling them up with corner clamps so that they'll stay square. It seems square is going to haunt me throughout this build. I have several problems keeping things square. I don't know why. I checked all my pieces that they were square before I assembled them. But again, I told you I thought this piece was cursed, and there's just more evidence to prove it. Now that the bottom is clamped to the sides, I'm sliding the plywood back in after I put some glue into the dado for it. And just like the side panel doors for the cabinet, I'm going to put glue in the dados and rabbets for the bottom. And since the bottom's going to have end grain, I have to put glue on the bottom panel's end grain as well so that the joint isn't starved. I used a clamp to keep them from spreading together. And then I just spent a lot of time trying to get this piece to line up. It would constantly slip, and I'd constantly have to go back and get it to be flush. It was driving me crazy. But eventually I got it, and I got the whole thing clamped up, sat in the clamps for a little while and dried. Now it's time to install the partition, or the middle shelf as I call it. I put glue in the dados and put glue on the shelf itself. Made sure the dados were facing each other because I do that constantly where I put it in the wrong way. Once it was in, I took a couple pieces of cherry, measured them so that I could get the right depth, cut them at the miter saw, and tested the fit. And once they were fitted, I glued them all in. There are way too many joint lines visible in this cabinet so far, so I decided to make some edge banding to go along the front of the cabinet so that I could cover the cuts for the dados and the rabbets and make it just look a little prettier. So here I am just cutting some thin strips of edge banding on the table saw, then bringing them over to my piece, measuring the length of the piece to the cabinet, taking it over to the miter saw and fitting it. Once I got the size correct, I put some glue down on the front of the panel, brushed it out so it looked nice, and then in between the spots of glue, I put some super glue to act as clamps to hold the thing in place while the wood glue dried. A few minutes holding it down until the super glue tacked up and held the pieces firmly. To be sure that the pieces didn't move after the super glue tacked up, I put a couple clamps on the edge banding to make sure the fit between the cabinet and the edge banding was nice and snug. I turned the cabinet around and repeated the same procedure, marking the length of the edge banding, cutting it at my miter saw, getting it exactly the right size. Once I got it there, I put the glue down, same procedure, a little glue in the corner, some space between everything so that I could put some CA glue to act as mini clamps. And then I put the edge banding on. And after that, I did the same procedure on the partitions in the middle, and the cabinet ended up looking quite nice. Okay, I have a confession to make. My bandsaw is not properly tuned for resawing, and yet I need to resaw this panel of quilted maple for the inset of my panel doors. So I took a tip that I learned from Eric Curtis, a fellow woodworker, and used my table saw. The panel was just wide enough that if I extended the blade to its full height and ran the board through once and then flipped it end for end and over and ran it through again, it will cut the board almost in half. With the resaw complete, I turned my attention to making the grooves and the stiles and the rails. The groove is actually very small. It's only 1/8 of an inch because of the width of the panel that I could do on the table saw, so I had to adjust the groove to fit. But once I got the grooves in, then I turned my attention to making the tongues for the stiles. They're also very small, but there's enough bite that they'll actually lock together and work as a tongue and groove system. Here I've got the till board. I'm going to cut it to width here on the table saw. The till board is going to be tilted back at 10 degrees, and it's basically the same plan as the intermediate cabinet, except it's going to be a little larger. So I'm going to run this through the table saw for width, and then I'm going to flip it over and run it through for the length. And again, I know a lot of people will consider this operation unsafe. I do it all the time. I'm very confident in doing it. But again, if you don't feel confident in doing it, find another way. Use a cross-cut sled, a miter gauge, cut it with a circular saw to rough size, and then finish it up with the table saw. Just be as safe as you want to be. I need the tilt board to tilt back at 10 degrees. So here I'm using my digital angle gauge, bringing the blade up to full height, and then tilting it until it is 10 degrees off 90. I'll have to remove my zero clearance throat plate and put the original stock plate in because that's designed to use the angled blade. But once I've got it all set up, I can run the plywood through, and after it's cut, it'll tilt back exactly 10 degrees. As with the intermediate project, I need to make some walnut 3/8 by 3/8 strips. I'm trying to predict how much I need, so I cut out a bunch of them from a stock piece of walnut, got them down to size, and then I will apply them to the tilt board as the border and the tool base. Once again, proof of the curse, I lost the footage of drilling the 5/8 holes for the chisel holders. You see me cutting out the grooves in them to let the chisels pass through so they'll sit nicely. As you can see, the pegs and the walnut borders for the tools, plus the magnets, are already installed on the tilt board. I'm not going to show that again. I went through it in detail with the intermediate build. It was the exact same procedure. So we're jumping right into the piano hinge install. I'm doing the right-hand side first. The first thing I do is place the hinge where I want it, and then use a Vicks bit in my drill to pre-drill the holes. Then I take the included screws and insert them into the holes, making sure that I do not over drill. Now it's time to move the door into position. I lift up the hinges and I'm going to prop up the door so it's even with the cabinet. And the first thing I'm going to do is make one hole with my Vicks bit and insert a screw at the top to make sure the door stays aligned with the top. Then I'll go to the bottom of the cabinet and do the exact same procedure, making my pre-drilled hole with the Vicks bit, making sure everything's aligned. And then once I know everything's aligned, I did all the pre-drilling for the holes and installed all the screws so that the door would sit nice and snug, stay even, and have the right reveal. It's time to get ready for the installation of the cabinet. You see me here cutting the French cleat. One side will be installed inside the cabinet. The other side is installed on the wall. I'll pick up the cabinet and join the two pieces, open the doors, and get ready for the installation of the tools. First thing is my number 7 plane, my number 5 plane, my rabbiting plane. This is going to be my 2 number 4 planes and my 2 block planes. Then the spoke shaves, and finally the router plane. These are the original 10 tools for the video of all 3 builds. Now you can see me installing in the right-hand door the really nice chisels I got from the Bourbon Moth Summit and J-Cats. And then these are my good Nerex chisels on the second level. Then on the marking and measuring side, I've got all my mechanical squares and my combination squares and my double squares, my marking knife, my hole punch, and my marking gauge. And here it is in the final reveal, opening up both doors with all the marking and measuring tools on one side, all my chisels on the other, and the 10 tools that I wanted to store in the first place.
Now that you've seen all 3, which one would you tackle? The beginner, the intermediate, or the advanced build? I'd really like to know. Drop me a comment. And if you're thinking about starting your own woodworking journey, my last video, 10 tips I wish I knew when I was a beginner woodworker, will save you a lot of headaches. I'll link it right up here. And until next time, make it so.